Sir, ma'am, are you Margaret Ellis, nurse in the 12th Division Field Hospital?
Yes. How did you know?
They ignored the old lady folding paper poppies until a Marine dropped to his knees. Margaret Ellis sat at her small wooden table in the corner of Riverside Market at 800 every Sunday morning, her weathered hands methodically folding red paper into perfect poppies, while shoppers hurried past without a glance. In 30 minutes, when Marine Staff Sergeant Lucas Ramirez recognized those same hands that had saved his life, her 40 years of invisible service would finally be seen. Margaret, 78, appears to be just another elderly volunteer whose paper poppy sales support veteran causes. But beneath her quiet demeanor lies a decorated combat nurse whose service in Vietnam saved countless lives through medical expertise that few civilians will ever understand. Her silence conceals heroism that military records can't adequately capture. What happened at the Riverside Market would prove that some heroes spend decades hiding in plain sight, and that recognition can come from the most unexpected sources when service calls to service across generations of sacrifice. Riverside Market in Portland, Oregon, a bustling weekend farmers market where vendors sell everything from organic produce to handmade crafts, while volunteers from various charities seek donations for causes that most shoppers politely ignore. The market operates with friendly Pacific Northwest efficiency, where social consciousness meets consumer convenience in an environment that values both community support and personal privacy. The Veteran Volunteer Corner has become invisible furniture to regular shoppers who see the same elderly faces each week, selling poppies, collecting for homeless shelters, or registering voters. Most customers donate pocket change without engaging personally with volunteers whose life stories remain untold behind their charitable smiles. Recent veteran suicide statistics and homelessness have increased public awareness about military service issues, but the disconnect between civilian understanding and veteran experience remains profound. This setting represents the intersection where military sacrifice meets civilian indifference, creating situations where heroes remain unrecognized despite serving in communities they once protected in uniform. Margaret enlisted as an Army nurse at 19 in 1968, deploying to Vietnam, where her field hospital treated wounded soldiers during some of the war's most brutal campaigns. Her medical expertise under fire earned multiple commendations, but her greatest pride came from soldiers she saved who returned home to families they might never have seen without her skilled intervention. Margaret's precise hands and calm demeanor under artillery fire made her legendary among medics, while her ability to perform complex surgical procedures in impossible conditions kept mortality rates in her unit far below average for field hospitals during intense combat operations. After completing her military service, Margaret worked as a civilian nurse for 35 years while volunteering with veteran organizations, always choosing behind-the-scenes roles that avoided public recognition she felt belonged to combat soldiers rather than medical support personnel. Her paper poppy sales raise funds for veteran mental health programs, though she rarely discusses her own military background with customers who see only elderly volunteer rather than decorated combat veteran. Margaret lives alone in a modest apartment filled with medical journals and military memorabilia that few visitors ever see, maintaining connection to her service through quiet advocacy that helps other veterans without drawing attention to her own sacrifices and achievements. Despite her advanced age, Margaret retains complete medical knowledge and steady hands that decades of post-military nursing couldn't diminish. Her ability to assess medical conditions at a glance makes her invaluable during market emergencies, though she attributes her skills to old nursing experience rather than military training that saved lives under enemy fire. Margaret's greatest strength is her ability to recognize fellow veterans through subtle behavioral cues that civilian observers miss, enabling her to provide support to struggling service members who need help but don't know how to ask for it from someone who understands military culture and its invisible wounds. Margaret must navigate civilian life where her military service remains invisible to communities she continues serving through volunteer work, while managing the emotional challenge of watching younger veterans struggle with problems she understands but can't openly address without revealing her own background. The primary obstacle is civilian society's disconnect from military experience, preventing Margaret from utilizing her expertise to help struggling veterans because her appearance and demeanor don't match civilian expectations about military nurses or combat-experienced medical personnel. The stakes involve both personal fulfillment and community welfare. Margaret's continued anonymity limits her ability to advocate for veterans who need support from someone with authentic military medical experience, while revealing her background risks unwanted attention that could compromise her preferred method of quiet service. This conflict represents the challenge facing military veterans whose civilian lives separate them from their service identity, creating isolation, even while surrounded by communities that benefit from their continued dedication to helping others. Margaret's Sunday morning routine at Riverside Market had become her primary connection to military community through poppy sales that supported veteran programs, though most customers saw only charitable fundraising rather than personal mission, continuing her decades of service to military personnel. Every poppy represents someone who served, Margaret would explain quietly to interested customers, not mentioning that her own service included saving the lives of soldiers whose families never learned her name or understood her role in bringing their loved ones home. The market work provided purpose and community connection while maintaining the anonymity she preferred, allowing her to support veteran causes without the recognition that she believed should go to combat soldiers rather than medical personnel who had simply done their jobs under difficult circumstances. Military nurses don't seek glory, Margaret often reflected while folding her poppies. We just want to make sure the ones who fought know they're not forgotten. Her quiet advocacy represented continuing service that civilian life couldn't eliminate, despite retirement from both military and hospital nursing that had defined her career. The poppy sales were personal memorial to soldiers she'd treated, especially those she couldn't save, whose memory she honored through fundraising that helped current veterans facing struggles she understood from professional experience that most civilian volunteers couldn't provide. Margaret's market preparation involved more than poppy folding and cash box organization. She researched current veteran issues, updated her knowledge of available services, and prepared resources for veterans who might approach her table seeking help with problems that required understanding of military culture and experience. Her approach emphasized patient listening over advice giving, recognizing that many veterans needed someone who understood their experiences without judgment or civilian assumptions about military service and its lasting effects on those who served in combat zones. Most critically, Margaret prepared emotional strategies for maintaining her composure when encountering veterans whose stories triggered her own memories of treating wounded soldiers whose injuries she remembered with medical precision that time couldn't diminish. Her table positioning provided optimal visibility for veterans who might recognize her or need services while maintaining distance from main market traffic that allowed private conversations about sensitive topics requiring discretion and professional confidentiality. Margaret also prepared standard responses about her background that provided enough information to establish credibility with veterans, while maintaining privacy about specific service details that she preferred not to discuss with casual market visitors. Her resource materials included current information about veteran services, mental health support, and benefit programs that many veterans didn't know existed or understand how to access without guidance from someone familiar with military bureaucracy and veteran culture. Margaret's arrival at Riverside Market followed precise routine table setup at 0800 Poppy display arrangement, cash box preparation, and personal grooming check that maintained professional appearance despite casual volunteer setting that didn't require military bearing. Her first customers were regulars who purchased Poppies weekly while engaging in pleasant conversation that avoided personal topics, creating social interaction that Margaret appreciated without the complications of explaining her military background or medical expertise. "Beautiful poppies today, Margaret," commented Mrs. Patterson while making her usual $5 donation. "You do such careful work." The compliment reflected Margaret's attention to detail that decades of medical training had ingrained despite civilian applications that seemed far removed from surgical precision. Young families with children provided Margaret's favorite interactions as she explained Poppy's symbolism in terms that taught respect for military service without frightening details about combat realities that children couldn't understand but needed to appreciate. The morning progressed normally with steady customer flow and casual volunteer camaraderie from neighboring charity tables, whose operators had become Margaret's closest civilian friendships through shared commitment to community service. Margaret noticed increased veteran presence at the market, younger men and women whose bearing she recognized despite civilian clothes, creating hope that her resources might help someone who needed support from another veteran who understood their experiences. Margaret's quiet morning took unexpected turn when she noticed a tall Latino man in his 50s studying her table with intensity that suggested recognition rather than casual interest in Poppy purchases. His military bearing was unmistakable despite civilian clothes, and his focused attention on her hands rather than her face indicated familiarity that Margaret couldn't immediately place among thousands of soldiers she'd treated during Vietnam. Her professional instincts activated as she observed his emotional response to seeing her, suggesting personal connection that transcended typical veteran-to-veteran recognition patterns she'd experienced at previous market encounters. Staff Sergeant Lucas Ramirez approached Margaret's table slowly, his eyes filling with tears as memory connected present reality with life-saving medical care he'd received 40 years earlier in Vietnamese field hospital, where a young nurse had performed surgery that enabled his survival. "Ma'am, are you Margaret Ellis, who served with the 12th Evacuation Hospital?" he asked, with voice breaking, creating moment that transformed routine market morning into profound encounter between survivor and savior, whose reunion represented validation of service that decades of civilian life had obscured. Margaret's heart racing as she recognized Lucas from surgical memories that professional training had preserved despite passage of time. The recognition created immediate emotional crisis as both veterans processed unexpected reunion that connected traumatic wartime memories with healing gratitude that civilian life had never properly acknowledged or celebrated. Lucas's detailed memories of Margaret's surgical intervention validated her military service in ways that decades of civilian nursing couldn't replicate, while Margaret's emotional response to seeing her patient healthy and successful proved that military medical missions had meaning beyond official commendations. Their conversation attracted attention from market customers who began recognizing that routine charity volunteer was decorated combat veteran whose service deserved recognition that community had never provided through appropriate understanding or appreciation. The emotional reunion between Margaret and Lucas created growing audience as market shoppers recognized extraordinary moment unfolding between elderly volunteer and middle-aged veteran whose tears suggested profound personal history that transcended typical charitable interactions. Other veterans in the market area began gravitating toward Margaret's table as word spread about decorated combat nurse whose medical expertise had saved lives during Vietnam War, creating community recognition that her decades of anonymous service had avoided but finally deserved. Market vendors paused their sales activities to observe reunion that represented validation of military service that civilian communities often failed to provide for veterans whose sacrifices remained invisible until personal connections revealed heroic actions that official records couldn't adequately capture. Local media representatives initially covering routine market activities recognized developing human interest story about hidden veteran whose military service had remained secret despite decades of community involvement through charitable work that supported other veterans. The growing attention created pressure for Margaret to acknowledge her military background publicly, despite her preference for anonymity that had protected her from recognition she believed belonged to combat soldiers rather than medical support personnel. Social media documentation by market visitors began creating viral content about combat nurse recognition that would attract national attention to Margaret's service and Lucas's gratitude. Facing unexpected recognition while processing emotional reunion tested every lesson military service had taught Margaret about maintaining professional composure while experiencing personal validation that decades of civilian life had never provided through community understanding. Lucas's detailed gratitude forced Margaret to confront her own service value, challenging self-perception that minimized her contributions despite medical expertise that had literally saved lives under combat conditions that few civilians could understand or appreciate. Her response to public attention revealed character developed through military training. She maintained dignity while accepting recognition, balanced personal humility against professional accomplishment, and prioritized veteran advocacy over personal comfort with publicity that her service finally deserved. The reunion crystallized Margaret's understanding of service legacy. Her military medical expertise had created ripple effects through lives she'd saved, families she'd preserved, and communities that benefited from veterans who survived because of her surgical skills and dedication. Margaret's military identity strengthened under recognition, reminding her that her service had value beyond personal satisfaction and that her expertise could continue helping veterans when community understood her background and qualifications for providing support based on authentic military experience. Her poppy folding became symbol of continuing service that connected wartime medical missions with civilian advocacy, proving that retirement didn't end military dedication to helping fellow service members. As Margaret's military background became public knowledge through Lucas's emotional testimony, the situation approached transformation that would change her role from anonymous volunteer to recognized veteran advocate whose expertise could benefit struggling service members throughout the community. Her decades of anonymity faced complete reversal as Lucas's gratitude attracted media attention that would either overwhelm her preferred quiet service or create opportunities for helping veterans on scale that individual counseling couldn't achieve. The market community's recognition of Margaret's military service created expectations for veteran advocacy that might exceed her comfort level, while providing platforms for addressing veteran issues that her medical background uniquely qualified her to understand and articulate. Her emotional response to public recognition suggested internal conflict between personal privacy preferences and community recognition that her service deserved, despite her belief that combat soldiers should receive primary honor rather than medical support personnel. The convergence of veteran recognition, community attention, and media interest created perfect conditions for transforming Margaret's quiet service into public advocacy that could benefit veteran community while challenging her personal preferences for remaining behind scenes rather than accepting spotlight that her heroism had earned. Margaret's carefully maintained anonymity shattered completely when Lucas dropped to his knees beside her poppy table while recounting in vivid detail how her surgical expertise had saved his life during a mortar attack in Vietnam, creating public spectacle that attracted every market visitor to witness extraordinary moment of recognition. "This woman performed surgery on me under artillery fire," Lucas announced through tears while Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment and emotion. "She saved my life with her bare hands when the field hospital was being overrun. She's a hero." The crowd's response overwhelmed Margaret as strangers began applauding someone they'd ignored for years, creating a tension that challenged every aspect of her preferred anonymity and quiet service approach that had defined her post-military civilian life. "I just did my job," Margaret protested, while Lucas continued detailing her medical heroism that had enabled his survival and return to family whose existence depended on her surgical skills under impossible combat conditions. The situation escalated beyond her control as market visitors began recognizing that routine charity volunteer was decorated combat veteran whose military service deserved community recognition that decades of civilian life had failed to provide through appropriate understanding or appreciation. Margaret faced impossible choice: embrace recognition that made her deeply uncomfortable or reject acknowledgement that meant everything to veterans like Lucas, whose survival proved her service value beyond personal preferences for remaining invisible. The crisis transcended individual discomfort to involve community education about hidden veterans whose service continued through civilian advocacy, while their military achievements remained unknown to neighbors who benefited from their ongoing dedication to helping others. Standing beside her poppy table while hundreds of market visitors recognized her military service for the first time, Margaret confronted fundamental choice between maintaining privacy that protected her emotional comfort and accepting recognition that could help other veterans by demonstrating authentic military medical expertise. The safe choice was retreat, pack up her table decline interviews, and return to anonymous volunteer work that avoided publicity and personal attention that made her profoundly uncomfortable, despite community gratitude that her service deserved. But Margaret realized that Lucas's public testimony had created opportunity for veteran advocacy, that her medical background could uniquely support, while her visible service story might inspire community understanding about hidden veterans whose contributions remained unrecognized. If I disappear now, I'm telling every veteran that their service should stay hidden, Margaret thought, while Lucas continued describing her surgical heroism. But if I accept this recognition, maybe other veterans will get the support they need from communities that understand military service. Her decision crystallized around duty to continue serving, accept recognition that enabled advocacy for veterans who needed support from someone with authentic military medical experience, despite personal discomfort with attention that her service had earned, but she'd spent decades avoiding. The ultimate stakes transcended individual preferences to involve veteran community welfare, whether Margaret's recognition would inspire comprehensive veteran support programs, or whether her withdrawal would reinforce community patterns of ignoring military service until dramatic moments demanded temporary attention. Margaret's choice would determine not just her own future, but broader community understanding of veteran issues and the value of military service that remained invisible until personal connections revealed heroic actions deserving ongoing recognition rather than momentary appreciation. Margaret made the choice that would transform her life while serving veteran community needs that her medical expertise could uniquely address, accept recognition gracefully, while redirecting attention toward veteran causes that required community support and understanding. "Thank you for remembering," Margaret told Lucas while addressing growing crowd. "But please remember that many veterans need support today. My Poppies represent all who served, not just one old nurse who did her job." Her redirection maintained humility while creating educational opportunity about veteran issues. Her transformation from reluctant recipient to veteran advocate created immediate shift in crowd dynamics as Margaret's professional bearing emerged to address community questions about military service and veteran support needs that her background qualified her to articulate. But Margaret's decision to embrace public role created new challenges as media attention threatened to overwhelm her volunteer activities, while creating expectations for veteran advocacy that might exceed her capacity for public engagement that military training hadn't prepared her for. "Service doesn't end with retirement," Margaret announced, while Lucas stood proudly beside her. "It continues when communities understand that veterans need ongoing support, not just annual recognition." Her military bearing had returned, transforming market volunteer into veteran advocate whose expertise could benefit struggling service members throughout the community. As Margaret's military background became community knowledge through Lucas's emotional testimony, she prepared for transformation from anonymous volunteer to veteran advocate whose medical expertise could address issues that civilian organizations couldn't properly understand or effectively support. Her decades of nursing experience combined with combat medical training provided unique qualifications for helping veterans with problems that required understanding of military culture and medical complications that civilian healthcare providers often missed or misdiagnosed. If I'm going to be public about my service, I need to make it count for veterans who need real help, Margaret told Lucas, while planning advocacy approach that would utilize her expertise effectively rather than simply accepting honorary recognition. The market community's recognition created immediate opportunities for veteran outreach programs that Margaret could design based on professional experience rather than civilian assumptions about military service needs and veteran health care requirements. Her poppy sales had always funded veteran programs, but community awareness of her credentials could enable direct service provision through counseling, healthcare navigation, and crisis intervention that her military medical background uniquely qualified her to provide. Margaret's transformation from hidden hero to visible advocate required courage that military training had developed but civilian life had never demanded until community recognition created platform for serving veterans who needed expert help. The moment of Margaret's public acceptance of recognition created electric atmosphere as market community processed 40 years of overlooked heroism, while understanding that routine charity volunteer possessed expertise that could revolutionize local veteran support services. I served as Army nurse in Vietnam from 1968 to 1972, Margaret announced clearly, while crowd listened intently to military background that explained her dedication to veteran causes. I treated soldiers like Lucas under conditions that taught me about trauma recovery and what veterans need to heal. Lucas's testimony provided credibility that Margaret's modest demeanor had concealed. She performed surgery during artillery attacks, treated soldiers other medics said couldn't be saved, and never lost her composure when everything around us was falling apart. The crowd's growing understanding of Margaret's qualifications created expectations for veteran advocacy that would test her readiness to transition from private service to public leadership role, requiring skills that military training had developed, but retirement had never utilized. Local veterans began approaching Margaret's table as word spread about decorated combat nurse whose medical expertise had remained hidden despite decades of community involvement through charitable work that supported their needs without revealing her qualifications. Media representatives recognized developing story about hidden veteran whose emergence could influence community understanding of military service value. Margaret's public emergence as recognized combat veteran created immediate transformation in market dynamics as her poppy table became focal point for veteran community that had never realized qualified medical advocate had been serving anonymously for decades. I want to help every veteran who needs support, Margaret declared, while accepting recognition that enabled advocacy rather than seeking personal glory that she'd spent 40 years avoiding through preference for behind-scenes service. Her professional medical bearing emerged fully as she began discussing veteran healthcare challenges with knowledge that civilian volunteers couldn't provide. Military medical training teaches you to treat conditions that civilian healthcare doesn't understand. Veterans need advocates who know military culture and medical complications. The market community realized they had overlooked qualified veteran advocate whose expertise could address local veteran issues more effectively than existing civilian programs that lacked understanding of military service culture and its lasting health effects. Lucas's continued testimony validated Margaret's credentials while inspiring other veterans to share stories about struggling with issues that required professional understanding rather than civilian sympathy that couldn't address root problems. Margaret's emergence as veteran advocate created immediate pressure from community organizations seeking her involvement in programs that exceeded her capacity for public engagement, while potentially overwhelming her preferred direct service approach to helping individual veterans. Media attention attracted national veteran organizations whose bureaucratic approaches conflicted with Margaret's preference for personal counseling and direct medical advocacy that her background enabled her to provide more effectively than institutional programs. "I'm not looking for publicity," Margaret explained while declining interview requests that threatened to transform her advocacy into celebrity rather than service. "I want to help veterans who need medical guidance and someone who understands what they've been through." Local government officials recognized potential for utilizing Margaret's expertise in official veteran services capacity, creating pressure for formal appointment that would bureaucratize her preferred informal approach to helping struggling service members who needed personal attention. The complexity of transitioning from anonymous volunteer to public advocate required Margaret to balance community expectations with her actual capacity for serving veterans who needed her medical knowledge and military experience rather than ceremonial recognition that didn't address practical problems. The climactic moment arrived when Margaret established clear boundaries for her veteran advocacy role while accepting recognition that enabled rather than hindered her ability to serve veterans who needed expert help with problems that civilian programs couldn't address effectively. "I'll work with any organization that actually helps veterans," Margaret announced, while declining ceremonial appointments that would limit her direct service capacity. "But my priority is veterans who need medical advocacy and someone who understands military service." Her position created new model for veteran advocacy that prioritized expertise over publicity while demonstrating how military medical professionals could continue serving veteran communities through civilian applications of their specialized training and experience. Lucas became Margaret's first advocacy partner, as he helped other veterans connect with her services while sharing his recovery story that proved effectiveness of receiving support from someone with authentic military medical background rather than civilian good intentions. The market community recognized that they had discovered invaluable resource for veteran support that would benefit entire region through Margaret's willingness to apply her expertise directly to helping veterans navigate healthcare benefits and recovery challenges. Margaret's establishment of clear service parameters protected her from exploitation while maximizing her ability to help veterans who needed professional-level support from someone who understood their experiences and could provide medical guidance that civilian volunteers couldn't offer. Margaret's successful transition from hidden volunteer to effective veteran advocate created model for utilizing military medical expertise in civilian communities while maintaining focus on direct service rather than recognition that validated her choice to accept publicity. Her establishment of veteran consultation services through Community Health Center provided formal structure for helping veterans with medical advocacy, while maintaining personal approach that her background enabled her to provide uniquely. Military medical training never becomes obsolete, Margaret explained to veteran clients seeking her guidance. It just finds new applications in helping fellow veterans navigate civilian healthcare systems that don't understand military service effects. The breakthrough extended beyond individual advocacy to community education, as Margaret's visible expertise influenced civilian understanding of veteran issues while inspiring other hidden military professionals to emerge and contribute their skills. Her poppy sales continued, but now funded her direct veteran services, while community donations supported expanded programs that Margaret designed based on professional assessment of actual veteran needs rather than civilian assumptions about military service requirements. Margaret's transformation from anonymous volunteer to recognized veteran advocate created immediate expansion of local veteran services, while maintaining her preferred focus on direct medical advocacy and personal counseling that her background uniquely qualified her to provide. Lucas became volunteer coordinator for Margaret's programs, while his recovery story inspired other veterans to seek help from someone who understood their experiences and could provide professional-level guidance about healthcare and benefits navigation. Most importantly, Margaret's emergence proved that communities contained hidden military professionals whose expertise could address veteran issues when proper recognition created opportunities for applying specialized knowledge to civilian service rather than ceremonial acknowledgement alone. Margaret's emergence as recognized combat veteran triggered immediate expansion of veteran services as her medical expertise attracted veterans from throughout the region who needed advocacy from someone with authentic military medical background rather than civilian sympathy that couldn't address complex problems. Lucas's testimony about Margaret's life-saving surgery inspired national veteran organizations to feature their story in publications that encouraged other hidden military professionals to emerge and contribute their expertise to veteran advocacy programs requiring specialized knowledge rather than general volunteerism. The Riverside Market established permanent veteran resource center at Margaret's Table location, while community donations funded her consultation services that provided medical advocacy benefits navigation and crisis counseling that her military training uniquely qualified her to deliver effectively. Local healthcare providers began referring veteran patients to Margaret for advocacy services that bridged military medical experience with civilian healthcare systems that often misunderstood veteran-specific conditions requiring specialized treatment approaches. Margaret's recognition created a template for identifying and utilizing hidden military expertise in civilian communities where veteran issues required professional understanding rather than charitable goodwill that couldn't address root problems effectively. 2 years later, Margaret's veteran advocacy program influenced similar initiatives nationwide, as her model demonstrated how military medical professionals could continue serving veteran communities through civilian applications of their specialized training and combat experience. The Margaret Ellis Centers became standard veteran resource facilities that combined professional medical advocacy with peer counseling provided by veterans whose military expertise could address problems that civilian programs couldn't understand or treat effectively. Her advocacy methods influenced Veterans Administration policy regarding utilization of retired military medical personnel for community veteran services, while establishing precedent for recognizing hidden military expertise in civilian settings. University social work programs incorporated Margaret's approach into curricula teaching veteran services, while medical schools began training civilian providers about military culture and service-related health conditions that required specialized understanding for effective treatment. The case influenced federal policy regarding veteran transition services and community support programs, while demonstrating value of identifying and supporting military professionals who could continue serving veteran communities through civilian advocacy rather than institutional employment alone. Margaret evolved from anonymous volunteer to respected veteran advocate whose medical expertise enabled comprehensive services that combined her military training with civilian community resources for maximum veteran support effectiveness. Her recognition provided validation for decades of service while creating platform for helping veterans who needed professional-level advocacy from someone who understood their experiences and could navigate complex healthcare and benefit systems effectively. Recognition enabled service rather than replacing it, Margaret often explains to veteran advocacy trainees. Military expertise doesn't retire. It finds new applications when communities understand its value and create opportunities for professional contribution to veteran welfare. Margaret's story proves that military expertise continues serving communities when civilian recognition creates opportunities for professional application rather than ceremonial acknowledgement. Hidden veterans possess capabilities that can address problems civilian programs cannot solve when proper identification enables their specialized knowledge to benefit struggling service members. Epilogue. Today, Margaret Ellis operates the Veterans Medical Advocacy Center in Portland, where her combat nursing expertise serves hundreds of veterans annually while training other military medical professionals to provide similar services nationwide. Her Poppy table remains at Riverside Market each Sunday, now staffed by volunteers, while she counsels veterans who need professional guidance about healthcare benefits and recovery challenges. Lucas Ramirez serves as program coordinator while sharing his recovery story that demonstrates the lasting impact of receiving support from someone with authentic military medical background. The Market Corner, where Margaret folded poppies in anonymity, now hosts veteran resource fairs that connect struggling service members with professional advocates who understand their experiences. Her recognition created national movement, identifying hidden military professionals whose expertise could address veteran issues that civilian programs couldn't solve effectively. Margaret's legacy proves that some heroes serve best when finally recognized not for personal glory, but for their ability to help others through expertise that retirement cannot diminish. The hands that once performed surgery under enemy fire now guide veterans through civilian challenges with the same precision and dedication that saved lives decades ago, demonstrating that true service transcends uniform retirement to continue through applications that benefit those who share the bond of military experience and understand that healing like honor knows no expiration date for those committed to serving others who served their country.